Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of The Bullet. My name is Paul Lathrop. I'm the Deputy Director of New Media for the Second Amendment Foundation. Joining me today, well, actually, this is a little bit of a different show, and I've been promoting this and I've been working on this one all week. I've been looking forward to it all week. Joining me today, both Tom Walls of the Firearms Academy of Seattle and Brooke Cheney, a Great Start Shooting School out of Connecticut. What I wanted to do today, and this actually got put in my head by Tom Wall's old boss, when I had my brain just slipped a cog here. When I'm sorry, my words aren't working.
It's all right. We still love you anyway.
You must be talking about Marty.
Yeah, when I had Marty Hayes on substituting for Tom Walls after the show went dark, we had a conversation, and I'm getting social media hooked up here. In that conversation, the term "competition will get you killed" came up, and I took a note down. And I thought that would be an awesome show to discuss sometime. I talked with both Tom and Brooke, and today is the culmination of that. So we're not. I very much apologize. This doesn't happen, but every once in a while, after my stroke, words just totally fail me, and I can struggle for minutes before.
It's all right. There's three of us. I'm sure some of us can fill in the dead air. I mean,
we'll definitely take care of it.
But any dead pauses, I'm pretty sure someone here can say something.
So also, as we get started, if you're watching on the Polite Society podcast streams on Facebook or YouTube, you can comment on that video, on the Polite Society podcast video, and we'll get those comments. We'll get them on the air. We'll discuss them. If you're watching anywhere else, go to Twitter, tweet with the hashtag #TheBullet, and we'll get those comments as well. We'll get them on the air. We'll discuss those comments live. So now that everything is hooked up, everything is ready to go, I want to go ahead and get started, and let's dig right straight into it, and then I'm going to open it up a little bit. I've often heard, and now I'm going to, again, interest in full disclosure, the next competition I compete in will be my first. But I've often heard, and I'll get into why in a few minutes, but I've often heard that competition will get you killed. It will ingrain bad habits in you, that should something happen, you have to use your firearm defensively. You're going to make a mistake, and you're going to be behind the eight ball, and you're going to lose because of it. I think I'm going to go to Brooke first. Have you heard that same thing, and what are your thoughts?
Oh, sure. So yes, I've heard it, and I think it's pretty silly, quite honestly. And as far as your first competition, I do a thing called Intro to IDPA. I'll happily introduce you to actual competition, Paul, for real. But yeah, as far as competition getting you killed, the general overview for me is that I was a gun owner since 1991 when I got my pistol permit. And I went to the range once, maybe twice a year, if that much, until I had kids. And then I'm like, I know nothing about this gun. And I realized that I need to learn more. So I started getting training, and it was just training on how to handle a gun. It wasn't tactical training or anything like that. And then I got into competition, and then I had a reason to practice. So I went from a gun owner of going once or twice a year to a competition shooter where I was shooting up to 1,000 rounds a week, plus hours of dry fire on top of all of that. Now, not every competitive shooter is going to be doing that, but the shortest version I can say is, as a competitive shooter, for $25, once or twice a week, I can go run a course of fire where I'm running around with my firearm and being watched by a safety officer and not doing wrong, stupid things. So I'm basically getting really cheap coaching at $25 a weekend, and I get to do it often. Versus when I have gone to like SIG Academy, and I'm spending an entire weekend and $500 or more between the class and all of that. So to me, competition is the cheapest way to get training. And the more time you have your hands on the gun, the better you are with your firearm, is my personal opinion.
Okay, now I'm going to swap over. I'm going to go to Tom. What are your thoughts, man?
Well, first off, Paul, you need to calm down. I am not anti-competition. I don't compete myself. The last match I shot was, it was a Gunset alumni match a couple of years ago. I am not pro-competition. I am pro-understanding what you're doing. And I think that Brooke brought up a good point that matches can be good training. Let me think how I want to word this. I think the most important thing about this could get you killed is that whole phrase is extremely insulting to anybody with two brain cells to rub together. The idea that a person cannot differentiate between a competition technique or situation as opposed to a real-world situation is ridiculous if you train for both. You're not going to default one to the other. There are competition techniques that don't make any sense in the real world. There are competition techniques that have improved and furthered the art of defensive handgunning. So where I come from, I'm purely defensive handgunner. And I have certain advantages. If I want to go practice under supervision, I grab my wife, who's also an instructor. We walk out to the barn where we've got a private range, and I can do that. So I'm pretty privileged that way. If you can understand that what you're doing is competition, go for it, because it gets you out, it gets you social, it gets you used to handling your gun, new stresses. If you encounter a scenario in training or in competition, and then God forbid, a real-world situation that's somewhat similar, you basically have practiced that, or at least your mind has somewhere to go. If, however, you intend to be a defensive handgunner and all this good stuff and carry concealed, and all you do is competition, I think you're missing out in the other direction. So it's going to be a balance. It's going to be understanding what your primary mission is, in my case, defensive handgunning, and taking competition for what it is and taking those benefits as well as understanding the disadvantages. Make sense?
Absolutely.
So I guess the short form of that whole thing is, it depends.
That is kind of the answer to any question that anyone ever asks. It depends.
Oh yeah, if you really want to avoid trouble. But that really is what it is. To me, the biggest thing in competition is this device right here. Okay, we can all shoot perfect 300 scores, but to some degree it gets to where, okay, so what can we do better? Well, I can shoot it faster than you can. And if you get into the speed-driven thing, you have to understand that's not always a self-defense thing. Now I'm busted up and crippled. I can't run stage to stage. Okay, or I can, but it looks really, really silly and is a little painful. I won't do a reload out in the open if my gun's empty. But there's some other really good stuff, and I think the competition overall has again, it's improved the art.
Yeah,
I will say too,
agree.
if it weren't for competition, I would never carry, because without competition, I would have never gotten the handling skills that I have, and I wouldn't have spent oodles of time at a SIG Academy or all the different training schools that are out there. So, I mean, for me, I try to get all my students into competition just so they get their hands on their gun. Sorry, Paul, did you want to say something? I'll be quiet now.
No. The reason I invited you both is because the discussion, I think this is a discussion that needs to be had, because I've heard that more often than I should have. And so, yeah, I want both your inputs, and we're getting comments in. I want to get some of these in, simply because getting this out in the open and getting insights from everywhere helps everybody out. Let me get this first comment in here real quick. This is from George. I think competition is good. You get used to your weapon under artificial stress. We used to do informal competition weekly at our local pistol range. And then Gun Websites has a question. He wants to know, what about the aspect of mental sharpness that can be improved with competition shooting? Look, the other issue I have with, well, the reason I never compete, let me get into that to start with. I am an extremely competitive person. In my youth, in my 20s, that really is, you're still growing up in your 20s. I don't care what anybody says. You're not a real adult yet. When I was in my 20s, I was into racing, and I was into racing in a big way. If you ever want to take a rich man and make him broke, introduce him to racing. If I am competing, especially in racing, and let's be honest, that's what most handgun competitions are, and 3-gun competitions are, is a race. If I'm competing, I want to win. If that $10,000 transmission will help me win the lowest class at the local track, you know what? I'm looking hard at that $10,000 transmission. If boring my engine 30 over for an additional $8,000 will get me 16 more horsepower, you know what? I'm looking real hard at that machine shop and thinking about it. If that trigger is going to give me a 10th off, but yet I won't be able to use that gun in the real world for carry, I'm looking at that trigger. That's why I don't get into competition. Because if I'm in it, I want to be number one. I want to be the best.
Brooks just busted to say something, I can tell.
Well, no, it's just so funny to me because, like, my husband and I got into competition at the same time. And my husband practiced like crazy because, to me, and maybe it's just my personality, because I know other women who are significantly driven to win, but for the most part, I got in so that I could feel confident handling a firearm. And I watched my husband walk around with his gun belt all day long, weeks at a time, getting ready for the IRC. And what did I hear? Click, 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 like all the time, all day long, every day, every night, because he was doing that kind of dry fire in order to get ready. His first competition, I think there was like 125. He came in 30th or something out of the world. And it's just like, oh, that's not good enough. That's not good enough. Whereas for me, I show up at a competition and I'm like, I just want to not shoot myself, not shoot anyone else, and have a good time. And so when you're like, win, 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 I'm like, yeah, me and my girlfriends would have this bet. Whoever got closer to the bottom was actually our winner. So it's a different mindset. And like I said, if it weren't for competition, there's no way I would have been comfortable enough to carry. So everyone's got a different journey. And like Tom was saying, there's stuff that makes sense on the competition world, and there's stuff that tactically is not correct and that sort of thing. But for me, and I mean, we talked about it a little bit pre-show, is safety is number one. And by having that safety officer watch you run around with a gun, you become more aware of where your muzzle is. You become aware of picking out targets based on the thing that you're going around and knowing what's behind it. And that sort of thing, because you're looking for shoot-throughs because you want to cheat. So there's stuff like that where it's like, like to Gun Website's question, it's like, I think that competition absolutely makes me so much more critical of what I'm looking at when I've got a gun in my hand.
You get another comment in here, another few because the comments are just, and I knew they would. This is a fantastic comment, a fantastic conversation. I knew the comments would come in, and they are. Big John 410 says the majority of gun owners leave them in the nightstand to gather dust and maybe have been on to the range once since their last CCW class. And
you're both nodding here.
I gotta say, guys, I love training, and I always want to get better, and I love training. I am a training absolute junkie. I will pay $1,000 plus travel expenses to go to another Masada Ube class. I am trying to arrange a trip out to see Tom out at the Firearms Academy of Seattle in the future to attend another another active shooter interdiction class. That and we'll let me get this comment up. Pete over at Gun Website says competition can teach you your own limits and your abilities, which can give you a better realistic perspective in real life. I say this a lot, Pete. Where I got taught my limits, my real limits, this is pre-stroke, was when I went to an active shooter interdiction class at the Firearms Academy of Seattle. There I found I could left-handed, which is my non-dominant hand, I could left-hand hit targets at 45 yards with both hands shooting at a moving target. While I'm moving, I could make hits at 30 feet easily, and I could make reliable hits out to 40. I found my limits pre-stroke. I want to do it again so I can find my limits post-stroke. But yeah, you're absolutely right, Gun Websites, in that it'll teach you your limits. There is training that can do that too.
I think that really brings up an excellent point, finding the limits under stress. I know, say if I'm doing a dot torture drill, okay, pretty common drill, I can shoot really, really well if it's untimed. I can take a playing card and make one teeny small group at 5 yards if it's untimed because there's no stress. But you add the stress, if it's, you can call it artificial or not, it's still stress with competition or wanting to do well, or with the wife, it's a dinner bet, which is, that's a whole nother episode, is dinner bets with the wife. Being able to do it under stress, because that way I know, okay, I'm going to go into this situation. It's presented to me. Here's a couple of bad guys. Here's a scene. I've been here before. I can do this. And it's also, like Brooke was saying, it's a reason to train. Back in another lifetime or so of mine, when I taught martial arts for a living, the next tournament was always a reason to train. Mm-hmm. There's a tournament coming up, man, I want this particular event. I really want to ace this event. And I trained harder for it, and my skills got better. And then the stress of doing that, if I knew that I had trained as hard as I could possibly train with correct technique and all that stuff, which applies directly to shooting, I could go into that stressful situation comfortable that I had done everything I could possibly do. When I did that, I did a lot better. And that translates directly into competitive shooting. If you know that I did all the dry fire I could possibly get in, and I have worked on my gun handling and my gear is squared away, you win with that confidence. And with that confidence, you have a little less stress. And with a little less stress, you can start to make good decisions with a gun in your hand. And that applies all around. That's universal, be it competition or be it self-defense, because you are making critical decisions with a live firearm.
And I do love the pushing part of things. As far as like when we're training, it's like some days you just go as fast as you can to see at what point do the wheels come off. Whereas when I was the gun owner who went to the range once or twice a year, it was because it was boring. I wasn't trying to do anything. It's like I'd take a target, I'd shoot at it. I'm like, yeah, what's the big deal? Because I had no metrics to measure it by. I had nothing to figure out, oh, did I do better this time than last time? So I think one of the advantages of competition is it teaches you how to improve. And I tell my students, because everyone's like, oh, I'm not good enough to get into competition. And I'm like, no, other way around. You get into competition to find out what you need to work on. Because if all you ever do is shoot at targets and you never change the speed, the rate, the distance, you don't know what you need to get better at. And people are like, oh, I'm not good enough, not good enough. And I'm like, you don't even know what you're trying to do. So I love competition for the fact that you have specific skill sets you're trying to do. And self-defense is, you don't know what's coming, so good luck.
Yeah.
I super agree with that. You've got to find out where the limits are. You also need to shoot with people that are better than you are.
Oh yeah.
Because how many times do we go to a public range and there's somebody and they're shooting and they think they're wonderful because they've never shot with anybody that's a little better than they are? So that pushes you to be better. And in competition, in our culture, in our gun culture, other competitors are usually super friendly. They're saying, hey, you know, this is what I was doing when I had that. Probably might want to try that rather than try to hide the secrets. we do a drill commonly in our first introductory class where you get to push, see where the wheels fall off. You know that outer limit, and then you can back off. And it is a repeatable drill. If you can do that 6 months or a year later, you can see the progress, and that just says, okay, I can do more.
Well, and there's a comment I want to get to, and it's going to branch us off here a little bit. DJ Play Nice says, so drilling can happen anywhere. What about dry fire practice? And I want to. It's dry fire practice is something I personally do a lot of, and I think it helps both on the defensive handgun side and on the competition side.
Yep.
The more you use your firearm, even in dry practice, the better you're going to get, and it will certainly help eliminate things like low and left and pulling the hand, recoil anticipation is what I'm trying to say. Am I wrong there?
Dry fire is really useful for trigger control, and I have run across other instructors that disown dry fire because they'll say, well, you're not going to learn recoil control. Well, that's true. The only way you can do that is to live fire, and if you break those techniques or those parts of the technique down, recoil control, trigger control, sight alignment, sight picture, and all that stuff, into the component parts and work on one piece at a time, I think it's more effective training. What I'll do typically is we fortunately have a finished basement. I've got a small gym down there. Between sets, I've got planet Earth full of dirt as my backstop. And between sets, I'll go and I'll dry fire, 4 or 5 reps or get a whole presentation. And it's not recoil control and it's not multiple shots, but it's really helpful trigger control. And I can do the gun handling down there with dummy rounds.
Yeah.
And honestly, I would say dry fire is even more important for self-defense because, let's be real, unless you are doing competition or you're in tactical training all the time, when do you have an opportunity to draw your gun? Never. Never in live fire, not in any square range that you're ever going to go to. And people think that a bad thing's going to happen and all of a sudden they're going to turn into La Femme Nikita and have their gun and be able to shoot. And it's just like, no, that's thousands of reps of drawing and making sure your hand is going where your holster actually is, making sure that your gun actually clears the holster the way you expect it to, all of that. And this is, to me, also where, for me, again, the baby steps of learning competition, understanding how to clear an outside the waistband holster and trigger discipline, that all of that, like you're saying, Tom, causes me to have more confidence. I call it my Wonder Woman moments when I'm like, oh, I can do this.
Go for it.
Have that moment, and it's just like, oh, wait, hold on, right, just in case anyone doesn't know, this is Wonder Woman.
Where's your golden lasso?
I don't know. We always tell the truth here in class. But yeah, so it's just like the competition allows you to do the shooting and moving. Because my very first competition was, I have a loaded gun and I'm going to be moving. Are we sure we want to do this? And all the guys around me were like, absolutely, just keep your gun pointed down range. And I got through that first competition, and the level of confidence that gave someone like me who had been a never ever, I mean, yes, I'd pull the trigger on a gun, but I didn't know what I was doing. So I think competition is such a great way to get introduced to actually shooting and moving without feeling like, I have to save my life, I must remember everything that Tom is teaching me right now so I don't die. And to me, that'd be a lot of pressure.
The thing about competition is you get to work your holster more. And that's a big thing we see on the defensive end is, and here in Lewis County, it's not super unusual to see somebody carrying open. And the first thing I go is, oh, God, seriously? That holster? People frequently will decide they're going to carry, get all the permits or whatever they need to do that, and never work drawing from the holster, let alone reholstering, which is, of course, where we see the most self-inflicted gunshot wounds. Yes.
Every time I see an Uncle Mike's holster or any soft holster, that's exactly what I do, Tom. It's please, dear God, let them never have to use that thing.
A couple other brands, but that's a good beginning. Yeah. We do a holster presentation in one of our class, and we have the good holsters and the bad holsters. Working from the holster is a critical skill that most people don't get. They think the gun's a talisman. On the side of the it'll get you killed in the streets, though, let me just throw something out there while we still got a couple of minutes.
Sure.
Okay, so we've got the almighty timer. Again, a useful tool, a useful measuring metric. But the idea of jumping into a gunfight and doing everything quickly, I think, has its downside. For me, rather than spending a lot of time doing competition stuff, I take those number of hours that I have, because my training time is finite, and I'll spend time doing things like, let's look at criminal behaviors, let's review stats, let's do another class or read another article on pre-attack indicators. Let's work on my building search techniques. Let's work on my use of cover and concealment. Let's make sure my carry gear is set up the right way. Again, it's a blend. If you know, in my opinion, if you know what your goal is, be it competition or concealed carry or some combination thereof, make sure your training directly reflects what you're doing. Know where your limits are, know your gear, know how to run your gear, and know how to make those necessary decisions.
I want to branch off, and we've been just on the outside, almost touched it a few times, and I want to go ahead and I want to touch that thing right now. We're going.
Does Susan
one
know?
of the common
Show me
things,
all the doll where Paul touched me.
one of the common things that you run across, at least I've run across, is I call it the Hollywood mentality, and that is, if I ever get into a fight, and usually these are physical fights. I studied Taekwondo, again, as a very young man. All of a sudden, this rage is going to come up inside me, and I'm going to be 5 times as good as the next guy. And I think that comes up in movies all the time. The person just finally gets enough, gets super angry, and they open up a can of whoop butt. In the real life, that will never, ever, ever, ever happen. That's a Hollywood and a bad book thing. Oh, I love that book. I love that book.
I mean, I think one of the best things Kathy Jackson talks about in this book is that you will resort to your lowest form of training. And this is why repetition, dry fire, drilling at the range, that sort of stuff. Because this was the first book I read when I was looking for training, because that was the other thing. Like, I didn't know how to get training. I didn't know what questions to ask. I didn't know where to go. And someone suggested this book to me, and I thanked them, even though I don't remember who it is. But Kathy does a great job of, we do what we're trained to do. And, oh, Paul, you want me to tell this story, so I'm going to tell it. I read this book. It talks about a woman who is at an ATM machine, and she walks up, and the bank that she's at is being robbed. She notices the police. She starts walking towards the police, towards safety, and then she turns around and goes back to the ATM and grabs her ATM card. Because what do? We do what we are taught to do, what we commonly do. What is our thing to do? As women, it's usually be polite. So I read that, and then I'm at the beach with my kids. My kids are 4 and 5, 3, 4 or 5, somewhere in there. And it's a beautiful summer day. I'm on the phone with my insurance agent, and I hear, get the baby. And someone's pointing. And I look at the lady pointing who's saying, get the baby. I look where she's pointing. There is a baby face down in the water with the diaper holding its butt up. Because I read Kathy Jackson's book, I remembered what went through my head. I don't want to drop my phone because I might worry the person on the other end, and they might call the cops, and I don't want that to happen. In the amount of time it took me to think that, the woman who had been pointing at the baby had gotten up and gotten the baby. Now, I was not alone on that beach. There were at least 75 other people witnessing this. Not a single one got the baby, including the 2 moms whose the baby was at their feet. And
Wow.
So this is one of those things where it's just like, people think, like you said, that movie mentality of, oh, well, it'll just happen if I'm in that situation, it'll just happen. It's like, no.
The adrenaline will kick in. That will help me. No, not so much.
No, adrenaline gets rid of your fine motor skills.
and freezes your brain for you, like I'm all too common with.
Yeah, I don't know karate, but I know crazy is not really a thing.
So yeah, but anyway, it's and when people say competition is going to get you killed, I'm like, anything that improves your gun handling skills is going to be advantageous to you ultimately. Because if you are always finger off the trigger until ready to shoot kind of thing, and you are, you have to move different places to take your targets, that's a great way to get comfortable and confident. And then when you want to get to, a competition, or you want to get into tactical, you've got skills to take with you. So you actually get to learn the tactical stuff versus having to worry about your gun handling skills.
Exactly. When you're doing a building search, either simulated or for real, and I've done both, I don't want to be worrying about my gun handling. My gun handling has got to be solid, it's got to be practiced, and it's got to be unconscious. So when I make a decision to do something active in that building search, whatever that may be, the gun handling comes automatically. It's pre-programmed. So in that, again, competition is a good thing as long as you can add it to any of the real-world stuff that comes up. I know people that compete that don't carry. I don't understand that. But at least they're part of the gun community. And I'm a libertarian. You get to do what you choose to do as long as it doesn't negatively impact someone else.
I like that. Let me get another comment in here quick. And by the way, thanks for Gun Websites for putting up the link for the Cornered Cat.
Yes.
And Kathy has an amazing blog there too. So she's retired now, though.
Yes, she is. She's living in the Virgin Islands. By the way, I'm taking a vacation in February, and I'm going, oh yeah, to the Virgin Islands. George says, I learned from Hollywood you can cock your Glock to intimidate a bad guy. If you really want to scare him, you can cock it twice.
Or you just take the safety off and that click.
Yes.
I tell our students that if anything you see on television or media with gun handling, just assume that it's wrong, because the directors don't have the time or the budget to train the actors, except Tom Selleck, Tom Cruise actually, and of course Keanu Reeves.
Yeah,
it's all gun fu, and it's all entertainment, but the gun handling actually is pretty clean.
If you watch the John Wick movies and you think you're going to do that, go look at some, and they're all over the place. Wherever you watch your videos, search for Keanu Reeves training, and you will see hours and hours and hours and hours of him doing exactly that, training. Yeah. He didn't get there just by watching movies.
Absolutely.
I grew up with this is a dummy gun, by the way. I grew up with the James Bond.
Oh, teacup
thing, Well, actually, it would be like this because I always had the finger on the trigger, or like this, And as a kid, that's what I thought was done until I actually took professional training.
Well, and actually, some of the posters on my wall are things like "You don't know what you don't know," "Trust but verify," "One size never fits all," and I mean the whole thing is that you don't know what you don't know. It's like I tell people, while you're here with me, do the things I'm teaching you and practice them. When you go to Tom, do the things that Tom is doing and see what works for you. Because another one of my favorite books, one of my other first reading was Brian Eno's. And it was really more about the mental side of it. As far as each time you learn something new, it's going to work really well. And then you're going to find a way to improve whatever that thing was. And so it's going to change. So anyone who says, this is the only way to do this, is full of stuff.
Full of beans. Well, we are already late, and we've got to get out of here because we've got to get Women for Gun Rights up here in a little bit. So we need to set this aside. Tom, I'm going to start with you. Is there anything on the training schedule at Firearms Academy of Seattle that you want to let people know about, or is there anything else you want to plug?
We are basically dark for the winter because it gets too cold and there's not enough sunshine. Other than privately contracted classes, we will fire back up on our schedule late January. and get into our bread and butter introductory classes, concealed carry classes, and some specialized carbine stuff right about the beginning of February.
All right. Brooke, any classes or anything you want to promote while we got a second?
All right. Well, I keep hoping that I'm actually going to close down in January because it's cold here too. But I haven't been learning that no word well enough yet. So January 13th, 14th, 15th, I think, I have an instructor course that I'm running. But you must apply for it. You cannot just sign up for it. You have to qualify. And other than that, I'm just doing pistol permit classes on Saturday to accommodate my daughter's volleyball schedule on Sundays. And that's kind of it.
All right. On my end, I want to encourage everybody, please do come join us tomorrow. And I'm pulling up my calendar, which is my secret weapon to tell me what is going on, because the brain doesn't allow me to remember that far in advance. Looking at tomorrow, we've got Beth Alcazar, Alex Uli, and Dan Waz for the Saturday edition of The Bullet. That's at 12 noon Central Time tomorrow. And then coming up next week, we've got the regular edition of The Bullet, and that's 5 p.m. Central Time every day to catch up on your news. And next Friday is Legal Friday with Alex Uli. We'll be getting into all the legal aspects of the Second Amendment. Until then, folks, I'm going to tell you thanks for watching, thanks for contributing by commenting, and please do come join us tomorrow noon Central Time. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and we'll